What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in. We got episode 2 of the Mix of Six Live. Excuse my doggy in the background. My wife's about to walk in the door, but we're going to roll with it here. I'm going to show you what's on tap for tonight. We got tonight's six-pack. I'm going to roll through some of these topics, and then we're going to bring in my guest, RJ Warzy. So, first on tap, not that Trogs needs our promotion by any means, but I thought it was pretty impressive that they were voted the best brewery tour in America for the second year in a row from the poll from USA Today. If you haven't gotten a chance to head up to Hershey and visit their place, take their tour, I highly suggest it because it was voted best in the USA for a reason. Next up on the six-pack, we have Ales for Tales. I'm going to take a brief intermission. Excuse me, life with a 2-year-old. You know how that may go. So, Ales for Tales, the Buy Local Coalition, they put on this event at the Gift Horse Brewing Company in York in August of 2022, and they raised $11,000, and that was for the Northeast Boston Terrier Rescue. And they have recently announced that that is going to be a annual event, so keep an eye out for that one. We just had Gift Horse Brewing Company on our latest release, but I'll get into that a bit later. Next on tonight's six-pack, we have a Pictures with Santa event going on at Windridge Farm. Every Sunday from November 27th on till the remainder of the year until Christmas, they have Pictures with Santa. They have a sweet event going on. They have a cool prop truck with Christmas decorations set up. So head on down there to the farm, get yourself a nice meal with the family, get yourself some drinks, and have some nice pictures. So next we have an update from our friends at the Back Porch Brewing in Carlisle. Follow them on Facebook at Back Porch Brewing Inc., and you will see some of their updates. We had them on in season 1, and they gave us a ton of information. Tim and Rod, they're very passionate about this as they enter on in their venture and opening their brewing company in Carlisle. Next up on our six-pack tonight, we have our recent schedule. So as I just mentioned, we have released an episode this past week with Gift Horse Brewing Company out of York. Brett and Dave was on that one and talking to some great guys from there. We are going to be recording at Stony Run Brew House in York as well with Tim March. Tim was our first guest during season 1. He was at Dad's house for a recording, and I think I said this last week. He was more nervous than we were, and so we owe it to Tim. We're going to go to his place in York, and we're going to record there, and it'll be a hell of a time. Coming up on future events here, we have several bookings. Thankfully, got some people booked for the next 4 or 5 weeks. We have Mark from Hidden Stories Brewing, Glenn from Brewery Tours. We spoke to him last March on season 1. We have Steve Goebel from the Goebel Group. We have Susan and Matt from Desperate Times Brewing. And we have Dane and Lauren from Michaud Brewing Company. Now, without further ado, I'd like to bring in our awesome guest for tonight, RJ. Give me a second here. RJ, what's up, man?
What's going on, man? It's hard to follow a list like that. Some pretty big
I'll
names.
Get my shit together. No problem. I thought you meant I was kind of mixed match.
No, I'm saying like when you put Trogs and Windridge in front of me as a small homebrewer, I'm humbled, and it's great. It's a good crowd and a good group to be part of.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for tuning in. I didn't know you were into this scene. If you don't mind, I'll give some background info on
Yeah,
how.
please.
Obviously, we've worked together for a few years now. Our paths don't cross at work too often, but I got a random call from you maybe in early in the summer.
Yeah,
Um, so you're based out of Western Pennsylvania, and you were in the area. Your wife and you were looking for a house in central Pennsylvania area, South Central PA, and you had stopped in on one of your weekend house tours at Liquid Hero,
correct.
and the bartender in there, Jay. Brief time out in your story. Shout out to Jay. That new intro music we got going. Jay was used to be a bartender at Liquid Hero, and Jay also is in a metal band, Gallowglas, and that intro featured the song. Oh Jesus, Scraps, Scraps from Gallowglas out of York. So give them a follow wherever you find your music. So yeah, RJ, from what I heard, you visited Liquid Hero. You mentioned the name of your company. Both you and Jay gift of gab by all means. So you guys got along great, I'm sure. And you mentioned the name of our company, and he was like, "Hold on a second, I might know a guy." So you called me. Like I said, we haven't spoken in probably a couple years, to be honest with you.
Right.
And we just talked for an hour and a half, something like that, about the housing market because we both moved this summer,
Right.
about beer, and you uh, you know further elaborated and you said you've been home brewing out west for a few
Yeah,
years.
yeah, it's funny. The world is small, and our industry, water industry is even smaller. So when you run into somebody that knows somebody that you're kind of excited, right? And
For
then it was
sure.
funny because the house that you ended up purchasing was one that my wife and I looked at. So I always joke with you that you sniped the house from us. So I appreciate that first and foremost. But then also, yeah, when you're out at a brewery, I mean, you and I both know, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, the the scene at a brewery is much different than a shitty local bar. I mean, frankly, right? Like
Yeah,
you could talk to just about anybody, bartenders, owners, patrons, and it's kind of cool. So we stopped in the Liquid Hero to just have a beer in between house showings and hit it off with the bartender, and we were in the same industry, and it's funny he knew you, and I had no idea you were into craft beer, right? So when he told me that, I immediately called you. Like it was the next day, I think. I saw him on a Saturday or Sunday, and I think I called you first thing Monday, and I was like, "Yo, man, I know I haven't
yeah,
talked to you in a couple years, but what's going on with craft beer in Central PA? I'm ready to move back. Tell me all the details." So yeah, it was a small world, but it's a great way to reconnect. And then we ended up moving back, so it's even better.
absolutely. Well, thank you again for joining. We'll get into more of your story here. We got a
Sure.
couple things going on. We got a comment from Amanda. Thank you so much for Ales for Tales shout out. We just announced our 2023 date. So excited. We hope to see you guys there. We will absolutely be there. And as we continue on this journey, it has been great making these connections. It's been great getting out, meeting people, you know, kind of providing that platform for other people to spread their good word, such as the Ales for Tales effort. So, thank you guys for watching at Central PA Pour on all social networks and wherever you get your podcasts. So, RJ,
Yes.
how did you get into home brewing?
So it's funny you asked that. I have a scientific mind. I like to say I'm an engineer by trade. I've always been fascinated by science. You and I are in the water industry, so water and beer kind of go hand in hand. I always say you can't have beer without water. So there was one summer I had a whole bunch of vacation days left over at the end of the year. So between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I had almost the entire time off. And my wife and I had just moved into a new house. This was about 5 years ago, and I had nothing to do. We lived in Western Pennsylvania. We didn't know anybody. It was blistering cold. And I said, you know what? I love craft beer. Why don't I brew some? And my wife said, sure, get whatever you need. And at the time, I didn't know you could buy a kit. I didn't know you could buy ingredients. I didn't know you could do all that, right? Because I enjoyed craft beer. I would say the scene was in the midst of exploding back then. So I figured, okay, I'll give it a try. And as anybody does, you start with a pot on your kettle at home, on your stove, whether it's electric or gas. And then you start with a kit and then you expand from there. So, I quickly moved to all grain because I enjoyed the complexity of it a little bit more. And then by the next summer, I was brewing any kind of style you can think of. I personally love black IPAs, number one, I love lagers. Like right now, I'm drinking a house lager from Hemauer. It's a Helles lager. I love that style. It's very simple, but it's amazingly drinkable. And then, of course, like everybody else in the world right now, I love hazy IPAs, right? Everybody claims that they're hopped out with hazy IPAs, but anytime you go to a brewery, the first beer they order is a hazy double or a hazy pale ale or something. So they're just so drinkable and approachable by everybody. So that's kind of my story. And then, since then I've evolved, right? I've entered competitions, and I have what I feel is an amazing blueberry sour recipe. Like I do kettle sours, and I've won some awards with that. And you just build over time, right? I've probably brewed 150 different batches, right? And
Wow.
I've dumped some too. I've dumped some, right? Like you have a bad batch and you dump it and you say, all right, that tastes like junk and I screwed something up in the process, and that's okay. So
we hear that a lot. I mean, it goes back to like the passion behind your work. If you're not brewing something of quality that you're willing to put out there, then the best place for it may be down the drain, and that's okay because this is an art.
Right. Well, and it's weird because the homebrew club environment is weird, right? Because you go to a lot of homebrew festivals and people pour you stuff, and some people are very proud of what they're pouring you and they want to explain it and they want to talk about it and they love it. And then some people bring you their dumpers that they don't want to drink, and then they pour that and they're like, yeah, this is my fruited sour stout with tequila in it, that they're just trying to hide that it tastes like something that it shouldn't. So yes, I mean, you'll drink it, but at the same time you're like, please don't give me rock gut, please.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we got a double shout out to Haymauer Brewing out of Mechanicsburg here. I
It's
just
funny, are
picked
they
up.
going to sponsor you after this or what? Because a double shout out.
Brooks is a great guy. We've done a lot of work with him, and he's been more than generous. So hey, we're not begging for anything quite just yet. I picked this up from him. He's at the Dillsburg Farmers Market pretty frequently on Saturday mornings. So my daughter and I visited him last Saturday, and this is a Mr. Tank Hazy Triple. So it'll be a good sleep this evening.
It was funny. So I stopped in there after work today for a happy hour with some coworkers, and their side pour of this beer. I'm not going to tell you it's not good out of the can, because it is, but when you get the side pour in the larger mug, it just hits different, right?
Oh yeah,
especially the first one after work, it goes down way too quick.
Oh, I could imagine. Goodness. So guys, share what you're drinking in the comments if you're drinking on this fine Wednesday night. Dad says I'll drink it. That's what we hear a lot, and we're the first ones to volunteer, kind of like what you're just saying, RJ. We're talking to some people, brewing, actually having an establishment. They're out there serving. They're like, hey, we're the first ones to say, hey, if you got a bad batch, call us. We're your guys.
Well, it's funny. So I think there's some benefit to drinking a bad batch if you're in the homebrew scene, right? Because if you don't know it's bad, like if you don't know the smell or the taste or the mouthfeel or something, then you don't know, right? Like my wife won't have the same nose that I will sometimes. So she'll drink it and she's like, oh, this is fine. And I'll say, it's fine, but it's not good. It's not great, right? So I'll tell her, it's acceptable, but it's not where I want it to be, right? So if I've always had the tagline, like I brew beer for my friends because I enjoy sharing. It's like baking for me, right? I bake up 3 dozen cookies. I'm not going to eat all 3 dozen. I give them to friends. And the same way with brewing a 5-gallon batch of beer, I try to share it with as many people as I can. So if I don't want my friends to drink it, I'm not gonna have it on tap.
Oh yeah, absolutely understood. So you guys, you can follow RJ's home brewing journey on Instagram at Warzy Brewing. I would absolutely love if you guys would be able to give us a sub on YouTube. We are creeping in on 100. That's going to be one of our big efforts going forward. We've been on this journey for about a year now. We are learning what we shouldn't be pushing, this and that. A lot of trial and error along the way, and that's okay. But one of the areas that we're going to be trying to push here is the YouTube channel. So please subscribe to that. RJ, so one of the things that you mentioned is, getting out into the festival or getting out into the competition scene. Or what are some of the events that you attended in the western part of the state?
Yeah, so what's amazing is getting involved with a homebrew club, right? Because if you're involved in a club, typically the club will sign up for a lot of events, right? So when I first started out, I didn't have equipment to keg, I didn't have equipment to pour kegs, any of that. So the homebrew club typically would have a box, and you would bring your own keg, or you would bring bottles and you would put it in there. So we would join there was a couple big events in Mars, PA, or in Zillion Opal, PA, or even down in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that we would be part of. And it was really cool because they're kind of competitions, right? There's an award for the first place or the one that gets the most votes or whoever gets the judge's vote. But it's also really cool to just walk around and see what homebrewers do differently than, I'll call them, real brewers, right? Because at a homebrew scale, you can do whatever you want. There's no rules, right? At a macro brew or even a microbrew scale, you have to have a certain rule and regulation. So it's kind of neat. And also the behind the scenes stuff is cool, right? After the event, before the event, everybody's hobnobbing, sharing stories, sharing ideas, sharing, oh my God, this keg blew up on the ride here. It's spraying beer all over the back of my car. Right? Just little stories that you're like, wow, I'm glad that wasn't me.
Right. Oh man. So do you have any homebrewing contacts, homebrewing groups in the central part of the state now that you've recently back to the area?
So it's funny. Where I live, I frequent Pizza Boy a lot. For brewery wise, I frequent Pizza Boy a lot. And then I found this little hole in the wall, Lydia and Stone, and I asked them, I said, hey, I'm a small home brewer. They just had a recent homebrew festival. We just missed it. We moved in the area right afterwards. And I said, where do I go about getting grain around here? And they recommended the same place that you just mentioned in your intro in York.
Stony Run?
Yeah, Stony Run has a homebrew shop right next to it. So I haven't gone in yet.
Bailey's Homebrew Supplies, I believe.
Right. But that is on my list after Thanksgiving, probably. Obviously, our garage, I'll call it my workspace, my scientific lab, as my wife would call it, is in shambles because we just moved in. But once it gets a little more in order, I plan to fire it back up. I hope before the spring, but worst case scenario, it'll be spring, and we'll get churning out beers. Because when I get the equipment out, I like to do 2, 3, 4 batches on a weekend and get the fermenters rolling.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the missus is on board with this side venture you got.
So my wife will tell you I have a competition problem, right? So when I first started homebrewing, as I'm sure every homebrewer does, you have your first good batch and you're like, hell yeah, I'm ready to open a brewery. Let's go. Like, let's start a business. Let's get into it. And then my wife had to reel me back in and she's like, hey, babe, we're talking about starting a family. So we have to make a decision. Do we want to start a family or do we want to open a brewery? And needless to say, my wife won that argument because we have a almost 2-year-old son upstairs. So much like you at the beginning of the episode, it's always chaos, right? So
right.
It would be tough to juggle a full daytime job, toddler, and opening a business. As every small brewery owner will tell you, it's a 24-hour a day job, 20-hour a day job. There's no time.
Absolutely. And the amount of hats that, the CEO, janitor, whatever, bartender, dude, the people, the men and women in that industry, they are passionate about what they do. Absolutely. But dude, it is 24/7, 365.
I've had so many people that know that I brew. They're like, oh man, I'd love to brew. Can you teach me? And I'm like, okay, do you enjoy doing dishes? And when they say no, I'm like, that's the number one thing about brewing is you clean more than anything. And anybody that gets a kid or something, I'm like, please clean everything 3 times. And like, what do you mean? I said, you got to clean, you got to sanitize, you got to make sure everything's good to go. Otherwise your beer is going to taste like junk. And they don't believe me. And the people that do it, their beer tastes good. The people that don't do it, their beer ends up tasting either okay or bad. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh man. So we have, you might be the perfect target market for this. Dave, one of our members, has an idea about getting some home brewers together in the near future, just to bounce ideas off of each other, sort of a round table of sorts. And some of the larger organizations, breweries in PA just put on a huge competition across the state. You mentioned Lydia and Stone. They're doing similar things of that nature. And again, our one of our main goals is to just to provide a platform for people to talk shop, to get their word out there, to get their product out there. So we are looking for people like you, man. Thank you for joining us. It's been great so far. We got a little more on the table yet.
Yeah, it's funny going back to your intro. The first, I would say the first craft brewery I ever went to was ABC in Harrisburg, right? Nobody ever thinks of ABC anymore when they talk about craft beer because it's like I don't want to say archaic, but it's an older style, right? They're all they're all clean styles. They're all, ales and ambers and lagers. But that's where I went first. And then my second brewery was Trogs. And it was right after Trogs moved to Hershey, and their setup has grown every year since then. And it's the most incredible brewery experience. To your point at the intro, it's unbelievable.
Absolutely phenomenal, dude. And the story behind it, behind the education of the industry, just the timeliness of getting out in front of the whole craft beer explosion, especially in this area, man. And the food, even, it's, a lot of these places expand so much further than just, the beer.
Sure.
Dude. Yeah, you can't beat it.
I think their new location is perfect because it's right next to a major tourist destination in Hershey and Hershey Park, right? You have a lot of hotels nearby, but also, yeah, their location, their setup, and their not only their beer scene, like their beers are all phenomenal, but their food, it's like top-notch brewery food, right? When you go to a brewery, you don't expect that level of cuisine, maybe nowadays, but when they first opened, their food was phenomenal from the beginning. So that's what blows my mind, is their whole business model and their whole setup is like a brewery and a home brewer's dream, right? That's the mecca. I think Trogs, in terms of the entire environment, right? Brewery scene, food, and beer. And then I think of like Alchemist in the Northeast in terms of like mecca of beer, right? And I've been to Germany. I've had some amazing German beers, but like Alchemist in the Northeast is like the mecca of beer, and I've been there. So it's like you juggle these things in your head, like what's best for you, right?
Absolutely. And to think they're expanding even further, aren't they putting some production buildings out back?
It's right out front, like so towards the highway out front. They're building a whole. It's almost like an L shape now. So it's unbelievable. They've expanded, I think, every year. It's crazy.
It's nuts, man. And they just put on an absolutely great experience. Like I said, they don't need our friggin' promotion or whatever. But it's like, if you want to be involved.
Yeah, but that's what people up and coming, thinking about brewing beer, thinking about what they want. I mean, I have a coworker who he brews Bell's Two Hearted clones because that's his mecca, right? That's what he wants his beer to taste like. So I think every home brewer has a design. And your roundtable idea would bring all those designs together, right? I'm good at, I feel, kettle sours, black IPAs, lagers, and bringing that to a table. And somebody else might be amazing at saisons or at, stouts, especially like a barrel-aged stout or something. Mm-hmm. And so bringing all those ideas together and changing ideas and talking about, okay, what fruit goes well with what spice and how long do I age this, and all those different techniques at a homebrew scale is really cool because we don't have all the technology that a Trogs would have, or that a Hemauer would have even.
Yeah, that's how great things happen. Yeah. So do you, on the recipe note, do you use any of these like softwares like Beersmith or something? Do you dabble, trial and error? What's your methodology?
So I'm in my mid-30s, right? I love technology, but since I've been brewing, I've been a pen and paper kind of guy. And I know that sounds crazy. And actually, it almost bit me in the rear end because I had I don't remember what happened. Something spilled in my basement, in my previous basement where I had my beer lab set up, and covered my entire notebook of recipes and pages and everything. Just, it was soaked, right? And I do everything in pen. I'm very meticulous. I keep notes, and it was soaked. So I had to take, me and my wife had to take page by page, just peel them off and let them dry out one by one, and then put them all back together. And we salvaged most of it. But I've never got into the software. I know it can do a lot of it for you, but I've always just been a pen and paper, even on the calculations, right? Water, salt additions, things like that. I'm always pen and paper. Just the way my mind works.
It's kind of a give and take in a certain way. I said, I know you said that you were meticulous and, but like you mentioned earlier, on a smaller scale, a lot of home brewing can be, trial and error, or just, trying something new in particular, where, a lot of the softwares are like, all right, we need to make this much. Right. How do we get to that? How do we get to that level of production with some consistency? So, yeah.
It's funny. Growing up, my stepmom would always make the best meatloaf, right? And when I started getting older, I was in high school, getting ready to leave the house. I would ask her, what's the recipe for this meatloaf? It's always so good. And she wouldn't have an answer because there's no notes. it's a squirt of this and a dab of this, and there might be bacon in it, there might be bits of bread in it that there might not, right? And I think a lot of home brewers are like that. It's a dash of whatever they have on hand. It's a glob of whatever. And then there are some that take notes. I have scales, I have weights and measurements and pHs and all of that on all of my batches, because I know if something comes out perfect, I want it to be like that every time. And if something doesn't come out perfect, then I change a variable, and I don't have that crazy miraculous meatloaf that's amazing one time and just okay the next.
Right. Oh man. So again, we are doing this every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. We got guests booked out until I think December 21st is our next available date. This has been quite a journey so far. Thank you very much for tuning in, man. You have any final thoughts or any thoughts on the rest of our 6-pack? Actually, I know you touched on a little bit of hard to follow Trogs, hard to follow Windridge.
So we talked about Stony Run, right? Like, I'm excited to go check out their homebrew shop. I love Trogs. I had no idea about the photos with Santa, but obviously I have a toddler, so I jotted a note down here. I'm like, we have to go to that now, because Windridge, the view is fantastic, right? If it snows at all, it's incredible down there. Even in the fall and whatever season, it's amazing. Their food's top notch. The beers, the ciders, whatever. So that's on my list this weekend. If I can sneak the wife and the kid down there,
you got to wait till the 27th.
Oh, well, you know what? Maybe I'll go this weekend and I'll go after the 27th.
There you go. That's not a bad idea. They have all kinds of events always going on down there. I had no idea that they were so big. The whole venue, their whole operation down there. We had the Brewer Arena on and Jason a few months ago, and man, that the kindest people, and dude, just an absolutely phenomenal product. And again, back to the food thing, it's like, dude, their chef even joined us on the show, and it was just
it's gourmet level. They have a great wedding venue. We actually, that was one of our top 2 wedding venues when we got married before we moved out west. So it's crazy, right? And just going back to what we talked about brewery wise, you have Trogs and Windridge, both are big places, and they're totally different vibes, right? Totally different. And then you have Lydia and Stone, a smaller brewery, but again, totally different vibe. And all 3 are incredible in different ways. So I think the craft beer scene's amazing. It's exploded in the last 10 years, and I can't wait to see where it goes in the next 10.
Absolutely. That's one of the cool things about this whole thing, man, because, you and I both with a young child, my wife, so sometimes she's like, oh, man, we can't bring the kid out to a brewery. And I'm like, well, more often than not, I'd agree with that. But, some of these places are providing a family environment.
Sure.
If I want to just go on a date with my wife, there are certainly places to go, but you don't have to feel bad about bringing the kid. Like you mentioned, you do this.
There's only like one in Central PA that specifically markets against kids, right?
Yeah, for sure, and that good for them, because there are certainly times when you just gotta get out there and be a fucking grown up. Excuse my.
No, it's weird, right? Because when I was in my early 20s and I went to a place and I saw kids running around like crazy, I was like, man, I wish I could go to a place that didn't have this, right? And now there's an environment for that. And then now that I have a little one, we also like to go. We like to have him experience things too. So it's 2 hats, right? 2 different people, and you kind of want to do your own thing, right? Like your kid needs to experience stuff too, but within reason, right? And we're not sitting at a brewery all day. We're sitting there for 1 beer, we're hanging out, and then we're going to go home. So
for sure. And we're keeping that money local, in more instances than not. So
you're saying I shouldn't go out and buy a 30 rack of Bud Heavy tonight, or?
I'll come over and help you drink it, man. But, hey,
okay.
We ain't gonna get a promo ad from Anheuser-Busch to tell you.
Oh gosh, you put that on the screen and you're gonna lose viewer count.
We're creeping up on a half hour, RJ. So I'm gonna call it. And dude, thank you for joining me. It's honestly a pleasure to talk to you.
Believe me, pleasure's all mine. If you have room for me again, man, I'd love to talk shop. And if you put together a panel or like a roundtable discussion, I'd love to be a part of it, man. Talking shop, something I love. Again, that scientific mind doesn't stop working.
Got you. Yeah, man. We will definitely take you up on that offer because we got a lot of plans in the works. Again, guys, follow RJ at Warzy Brewing on Instagram. Follow us at Central PA Pour on all of your social media and wherever you find your podcasts. Look out for our full length episodes coming out every 2 weeks. We typically push them out on Saturday morning. And keep an eye out for every Wednesday at 8 p.m. We're going to have a Mix of Six live with me, sometimes some of the other guys, sometimes some guests. Thank you very much for tuning in. We're going to hit this intro music. We're not going to do this very often just because it's the first premiere here. We're going to hit this music one more time for Jay out of Gallowglas in York. Thank you all for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. Oh, man. Give me a second.